about kind of the nitty-gritties about the transition years. So when you guys were transitioning into soil health, what sort of things how did you start? Where did you start? What did you change? What were your mixes? We can talk about plant mixes, we can talk about herbicide, we can talk about pesticide management, that whole thing.
When we transitioned into the soil health stuff, I mean, we really jumped in wholeheartedly. I guess we went over our heads for a little bit there, it seemed like. But some of the things, I guess, we changed. We bought a no-till drill so we could plant our wheat and barley with no-till. And then on our planter, we just made some modifications to our planter, put row cleaners on, heavy-duty down-pressure springs, changed our closing wheel system to a spike closing wheel system, a few things like that. Simple modifications to our regular corn planter was able to allow that to happen.
What kind of corn planter do you have?
We run a John Deere 1710. It's a 16-row, 22-inch planter. But we didn't spend a lot of money on that. As far as that goes, I mean, you can really get carried away with a planter nowadays and call 1-800 Precision Planting. You can spend $100,000 pretty quick, and on an old planter that's still worth $25,000. But and not to knock those guys at all. I mean, they have tremendous products and they're a tremendous company. But there's a place for that and time, and I think in time we'll all get there as far as that goes. But for us, getting in and started, and we got to watch the budget a little bit here. And so those types of things, and one thing that we've learned the first year is to slow down just a little bit, because that opener's got to be able to penetrate that soil, and especially when we were first transitioning, our soil didn't have quite the structure or the mellowness that it does today, and so it was a little bit harder to get the planter in the ground. That's where we went with those heavier duty down pressure springs and that sort of thing. So that seems to have helped a lot. And on the small grain side, it was pretty simple with the no-till drill. I mean, that's what it was designed for. So that was pretty much a hook up and go kind of deal. But fertilizer management's been a different issue that we've dealt with no-till. We put a lot of our fertilizer down with that no-till drill. We bought a different air cart, so 3-compartment with variable rate on it. So we variable rate all of our fertilizer, N, P, and K, by zones in the field. Every field we have has 5 zones that we go through, and the P zone and the K zone and the N zone are all different. So we work with a private company out of Castleton to do those prescriptions for us. But one of the other things, I guess, is just adding that diversity with the cover crops after the small grains came off, and then grazing that late into the fall. One of the first years we did that, we had cows grazing wet clean out into December, and snow on the ground, and they were digging through the snow and pulling up turnips and radish leaves and all that. And I don't know how many guys said we were crazy, we're starving our cows, and our nutritionist worked pretty close with him with the cover crop seed, and they sell cover crop seed too. And
he'd never seen it.
He'd never seen anything quite like it. And we took a forage sample. He sent it in and come back 220 RFV, in December. And the guys at the local feed mill were giving them heck. Why didn't tell them hog boys to wean their calves? Criminy, you got to get their cows off and get them home and start feeding them. They're starving them. And he goes, have you been out there to look at them? Well, no, I can see them from the highway, And he goes, I think you guys should go out and look at them. They're some of the fattest cows I've seen around. There's just that mentality of, you're starving your cows. Well, in fact, they were doing better than anything. They couldn't have sent anything out the door with that feed mill that would have matched what they were getting from grazing. And we didn't have to feed them. They did it on their own.
So what did you have in that first mix? What was the species and the rate that you had put down?
That first mix was mostly radish and turnips, about a pound of each. And then we had about 15 pounds of barley in there, and some winter hairy vetch, just a couple pounds of that. I don't know the exact rates. That was 5 years ago now. But Jeff, you made the mix-up, I think, didn't you? What was it?
I think there was some winter peas or something.
There was some Austrian winter peas in there.
Maybe 10 or 15 pounds of peas in there. or something.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
We also found out that year,
Yeah.
don't bother planting that cover crop when there's hailed on barley, because that kind of dominated the whole
Yeah.
system, so.
Yeah, when we combined that barley, I mean, before the header, the ground was covered with barley heads and seeds. We had hail about 10 days before harvest on that one, laid the whole field flat. And it was a lot of barley regrowth, primarily on them fields. But since then, I think that cover crop and the livestock integration was a big part of speeding up that transition to no-till and soil health. Everybody talks about it takes 5 to 7 years for that soil to change, and I truly believe we did it in 2 or 3, because it really has mellowed out fast from what everybody was telling me would happen.
And having the ability to put livestock on it too is such a big plus. We had a similar story too. We had the cows pairs, 50 pair out west running on cover crop and paddock pasture, rotational grazing. And we took our creep feeder out there, which is at the mill, they like to just push all their products and push creep feed and this and that. Them calves never ate no creep feed. We brought that creep feeder home, and our calves, my kids, they paled that creep feeder out after we weaned the calves, because they were getting all they needed off the cow and out there then, and we never used creep feed since. There was a few ton of creep feed they had to pale out.
We overgrazed our system that Jeff designed for us because we were not getting our fencing around the cover crop acres, and our calves were going through a full feeder in 10 days, and we finally got them onto the cover crop, and they took them 30 days to empty that creep feeder before they ever went back to it. And that's the point where we were like, well, why do we need the creep feed in the fall if we're feeding the cow enough to feed the calf too? So we kind of quit feeding creep feed then too. So.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and then getting back to when you said the neighbor perception. Well, the first time we were up in the front yard filling our drill with cover crop, Mark was here helping, and we were, this was on that first barley field we cover cropped. We had 2 neighbors stop by and want to know what was going on because our field is so close to town here. Well, within an hour, they had seed ordered and they had the drill lined up for. They both had livestock, and they were both going to do the same thing as soon as we got done that night. So.
Have you kept in touch with them? How did that go?
Neither one of them did it anymore, but they did that, and it went fine for them. It's just like you said, the no-till perception is because it's such a. It just don't look that good to start with. It seems like it's slow to come, but if you looked at the beans right out here behind you, they just didn't look good for a long time either. But they're coming. And
they look just as good as a conventional field, but
right.
Don't have that contrast.
You just can't.
The black dirt gives it a better look.
You can't roll them.
Looking at all that residue, it doesn't look so pretty.
They want to roll their beans in 5 days, and and this and that.
You won't roll beans in a cornfield that you no-tilled into, because, like you said, you're moving trash to get your soil. And yeah, you can see your strips, but that material that you move, it works its way back in over rain and wind and whatnot, so it covers it back up. So like you don't see the bean until it gets a certain height. So I mean, like I said, looks is a big factor of how people perceive things, I guess is the right word.
But
if I'm using the right word.
We got a better stand of beans now than we ever really had, because we're getting them all to grow. Before, and some of them got into dry dirt or this and that, now
yes, it is a learning curve, because not every inch of that particular field should be probably fit to be planted. And myself, I found that out. So, sometimes you got to come back and finish a field. You can't always finish a field always, but you can. I mean, in the end, it'll all be good.
Well, let's talk about that learning curve a little bit. Can you guys talk about your connection, or how you guys have worked together over the years, your 2 farms?
Well, when we first started no-tilling, these guys were doing it first, so Ryan was just a good call, about, like he told me right off the bat. I remember he said, well, don't plant something that should be planted 1.5 inches along with something that should be planted 1/4 inch. I mean, you got a planting depth. We found that planting depth is more of an issue with no-till than we ever would have given it credit for. We plant our beans deeper now, and that cover crop, you plant some species that all kind of need to be in the same type of depth. Otherwise you're wasting your money on both ends there.
So finding a mentor, somebody that you can bounce ideas off
Yeah.
of. Is that, how important is that?
Well, I think that's huge in today's world. You know, there's too many times that, you know, nobody ever wants to share any information. Everything's so proprietary for everybody's farm. And, you know, I've got friends that are 50, 60 miles from here. We bounce ideas back and forth, right and left. You know, there's no hesitation to call and ask something and provide information. And there's never been a question that they haven't answered and I haven't answered for them. But boy, you go, you know, across the road and ask somebody, boy, it's top secret information. You know, it's, I don't know.
But what works for them won't work for us, vice versa, our way to them too. On all parties, you know.
I always figured, yeah. You know, it's who you know, it ain't what you know on everything, you know. I mean, I got 500 numbers in my phone, and I can call anybody any time of the day on any given subject, it seems like, and you use those sources. Yeah, you know, I had somebody call me yesterday when I was mowing grass. He was interseeding, and he was wanting to know how to calibrate his own drill, you know, and just, or how you calibrate something homemade, you know.
And I think, you know, bouncing those ideas back and forth and having some of the industry professionals as well to bounce those ideas off, like Jeff and Mark. I mean, I've talked to Jeff many times and run different scenarios and trying to figure out, you know, different grazing systems that might work better than others, and cover crop mixes and those types of things.
There's a lot of terms too. We never gave a thought to, you know, who would have ever cared about cow pasture is cow pasture. We never worried about warm season, cool season grasses, legumes. You know, most of our pasture is cool season grass. You know, we're with hardly any legumes. You know, and that's Mark come around and, you know, and he forgot more yesterday than we'll ever know, you know, about stuff. And, you know, he just looks at everything differently. You know, it's just a good visit to have. Whenever he comes, I try to steal a half an hour from him, and we just go for a little cruise. And
we all kind of have the same vision or same path, but we all see things from a different angle of so yeah, it's essential. It's essential to have a partnership or a relationship doing this.
So how has your view of agriculture changed now that you've sort of started to manage for soil health?
there's a lot of problems in the whole export-import system. I mean, it's just, all of a sudden we found out how vulnerable we are to selling what we're making. You know, I mean, wow, I mean, we can't even get our beef to our neighbor, you know. I mean, that was, you know, this whole virus thing has opened up a lot of eyes to what the problems in our whole system. It's not our fault. We're nothing that we can do just a whole bunch about, you know, at this point. We just, things that we thought everybody else was taking care of weren't taken care of, you know, in the farm to plate type of scenario. You know, and hopefully that gets dealt with, you know.
I think as far as, you know, the future of soil health and ag on our operation, one of the things that, I mean, I'm a little more excited about now than I used to be is the livestock side of things and the pasture management and grazing, you know, longer into the winter, you know, saving that hay cost. We've saved a significant amount of money on winter feed costs on our operation.
About how much money, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, like that one year we figured about $40,000. You know, we grazed until January 28th. We've done that a few times. March 26th one year. That was the year we figured we saved about $40,000. I think the shortest we've done is Christmas Day. Recently, in the last 6 years. End of January, a couple of years. End of March. First week of February, somewhere in there. Pretty successfully been able to do that. You know, and we've incorporated some, you know, full season cover crops into some of that to help with those deeper snow events when we get later into January, being able to still be able to graze. But for the most part, we ran out of forage before we had too much snow. So, but I mean, summer pasture used to be someplace to put the cows so you didn't have to deal with them, you know. And now it's another place to manage. It really is. And for some people that may think that just sounds like a whole bunch more work. But, you know, if we can do a little bit of work moving cows, you know, every 3-4 days or something like that, or, you know, if we can do it daily or if we have time, you know, but we're trying to be flexible. If we're going to be busy, you know, give them a paddock big enough for the week. If we're going to be busy that week. But if you know you can move them every day for a few days, well, then break it down. You know, we use polywire and step-in posts to make different paddocks, and we've got about somewhere between 35 and 40 permanent paddocks on our whole operation now, and but that number's limitless with polywire and some of this modern fencing technology that is out there now. And anytime we can start breaking that down and giving more days of rest on that grass, we grow more grass. We've combined our herds. We used to run 3 different herds. Everybody's running together now. We've got more grass now and more cows than we ever have. And I thank Jeff Duchesne for that. And just having that eye opener, of seeing some of that stuff and what's possible.
Yeah, same here. There's things we're doing with our livestock that our dads never had the opportunity to do. The polywire and the fencing supplies, just weren't available. My dad would walk around with a post hole digger and a wooden post, and that's the only option he had. Now we can build or put up a lot of fence in a hurry, and with that came manure management. We feed our cows out on corn stalks until the first calf is born. So our cow herd don't produce a lot of manure through the season, and we feed in a different spot every day across 200 acres, so they're spreading the manure for us, and it's just and we test our manure and spread that manure accordingly towards, as the soil test allows, so we're not even over applying our manure anywhere. And growing up, we'd apply it to the quickest, easiest way to get the manure spreader back to keep, it got spread on the same type of ground that, all the time. Now we're rotating around and.
Usually the closest field that you could turn the spreader on is what happened.
Yeah. Now you go
Is that
out there.
because you had an open cab tractor?
Pretty much.
I mean, now you got 200 acres out there, and you could, if you walk around there and checked it in the spring, there's hardly an area, 3 to 5 feet or so, where you're not going to find a paddy. And that whole, that's how good that them cattle are spreading their own manure, across that thing. It's just, wherever you guys winter graze and feed and stuff, it's, it's tremendous, what they're doing themselves. We're less hands-on, and we can cover more livestock with less people, that way. Yeah.
So you've obviously seen an impact water quality in part because of that, because you are certified now.
When we did our water quality certification a couple years ago with Jim Lawn there, we never had to make an adjustment. We were the fourth one in the county to get water quality certified, but he said it was one of the very few that he's did where we qualified right after the first interview. We never made an adjustment to what we're doing anywhere. We've already put in our own waterways. We'd already put grass hay and stuff in some gullies up north, and we'd already been doing a manure management plan through the NRCS in Clay County, and we were already doing those things. We qualified right after the first interview.
And how does that make you feel to be able to hang that sign on your farm?
We thought it was pretty important, especially where we live here. We thought it was good for the community to know, with a lake right next to us, and this and that that we were being responsible as neighbors to the city with livestock, and that we were doing our part to be good neighbors to the community also.
And can you guys talk about your manure management, how that's sort of changed over the years?
Well, we've gotten the cows out of the barnyard. We don't feed our cows in the barnyard anymore. Same kind of deal. We move where we feed through the winter, and just being able to graze later, into the year, that's helped tremendous, because that, when we're moving polywire, through the winter, those cows are moving every day to a new paddock, and they're spreading their own nutrients as well. And then, when we do transition into feeding them, then we move that feeding area around. We're in the process of putting in more infrastructure to be able to reach areas of our farm for winter feed that haven't seen that yet. And the goal is to haul that feed once a day just a little bit further away from home, so we don't have to truck the manure out of the barnyard that much further. I think that having that distribution of nutrients across that farm is going to be tremendous in helping out with water quality and all that stuff too. We haven't gone through the paperwork to do that yet, but everything that they've talked about, we're doing all that same stuff too already, and we've been doing it for years. A lot of those things our father did, just because it made sense, and common sense prevailed for him. Mm-hmm. And but one thing that he didn't do is drive any extra further to spread the manure. you know, it was the same 40 acres, got the same manure, you know, whether from back in the days of the A John Deere, you know, pitchforking it onto the sleigh or whatever.
You just couldn't.
You didn't go that far.
You didn't allow it. You just didn't have the time.
Just,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah.
So, you know,
Yeah.
but, you know, today when we have a custom spreader come in to do the spreading on our feedlot, and we're rotating the fields that goes on, we're spreading that nutrients out a little bit further. You know, we used to lay it on pretty thick, and the mentality there was, you know, well, we're going to plant silage corn here next year. We got to have plenty of nutrients, and now we, you know, drive a little bit faster and spread that a little bit thinner. Try to get that spread out a little bit more. You know, and we are surface applying our bed pack manure, but with the no-till and the cover crops, I mean, our water infiltration has gone up so dramatically. We don't have the runoff that we used to. You know, when we were doing tillage and that, we'd get those gully washers. You know, an inch rain used to cause erosion, and now, you know, we can take a 2-inch, 3-inch rain and not have any soil move. So we're pretty happy about that.
Have you noticed any difference in your planting, like from a field that you've grazed to a field that you haven't grazed? You know, like corn stalks or something on. So if you had a cornfield, you know, 2 fields and you graze one, you didn't, they both went into beans, they plant pretty similar now, or?
The grazed one goes a lot better. There's a lot less material.
Yeah.
And when you come to spray, there's hardly any volunteer corn, like zero. Them cows will find about every kernel out there. Yeah. You know, it is. Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, yeah.
I don't care how good you set your combine, I mean, you're gonna have either header loss or cob loss or whatever, but the cows do find it, there's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Where you chop silage, you spill a little bit of this and that, them cows clean all that up. I mean, they fix every little mistake you made, you know, and this and that, and they do a good job. And yeah, no, the stuff that's grazed is a lot, it plants a lot nicer.
A lot of our winter grazing the last couple of years has been standing corn. And everyone's like, well, don't they just trample it down? Yeah, within 20 minutes, it's all freaking flat on your own. But like you said, they're little vacuum cleaners. They clean up everything. There's nothing left but the stalk, and by spring, that's all gone because they've eaten it then. So.
And you wouldn't think that they would eat so much on a combine field after they're in it, but they do.
Yeah. You know, and grazing corn stalks with, you know, really no corn other than just what the combine loss was, them cows are pretty loose on that right off the bat. You know, that's totally throwaway salvage type of feed, and that's great quality feed for quite a while. Yeah, we try to get them in there the day we combine. We try to be set up with all our fence and everything to get them in there the day, you know, because it's still even green with moisture and stuff in the stalks. Then it's sooner the better. Yeah.
It's like for Ryan and Michael, I think they try to fence or have fenced everything that they.
Yeah, you guys are.
Yeah, we've
more
been
permanent
working on getting
fixing.
all of our cropland acres fenced. We've got a little bit left to go. And there'll be some land that's further away from home that won't get fenced. Some of that's rented land and that sort of thing. But all of our home stuff and then our ground that we've got set up south of town there, we've worked with Jeff on securing some EQIP funding for that, and working through a grazing plan to help, you know, develop that forage chain. And getting that infrastructure in place it's a big hurdle for some of this stuff, being able to get those cows on the cropland. But you know, once you've got that in place, and like you said, when you pull out of the field to the combine, if the cows are in the pasture right next to it, you just open the gate and then they're in there.
Yeah.
You know, that's and not everybody has that luxury of being contiguous or that sort of thing too. But you know, if you can get cows moved, for us, I mean, we believe it pays to haul those cows to that cornfield. If you got a quarter section of corn stalks and 100 cows, you can get 30 days of feed off of that. Well, that's money in your pocket that you didn't have to haul hay or buy hay, you know, depending on what your winter feeding situation is. And plus, they're distributing that nutrients on the cropland. You know, getting that manure out of the barnyard, out of the feedlot. It's huge.